Hello, and welcome to the 15th edition of Talking Solutions, the podcast of the Association for Solution-Focused Hypnotherapy. I'm Sally Hare, and today we'll be looking at a subject which attracts a lot of attention in the media: narcissism and narcissistic abuse. Medical news today defines narcissistic abuse as a form of abuse stemming from narcissistic behaviours. It can be emotional, psychological, or physical. Narcissistic characteristics can include volatile behaviour, lack of empathy, and aggression. Narcissistic abuse may include gaslighting, constant criticism, humiliation, and coercion. So we'll be examining how this behaviour can affect people subjected to abuse and what helps. To help me navigate this complex issue, I'll be talking to Tracey Grist. Tracey is a full-time, experienced hypnotherapist trained in hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, counselling, life coaching, and art therapy. She practices at South London Therapy in Balham and has been chair of the National Council of Hypnotherapy since 2016. She's also a podcaster and author. So welcome, Tracey. It's lovely to have you on.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thank you, Sally. Oh, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Yeah.
You're a busy lady, and I'm very glad that we've got you here to join us. So to start off with, where does your specific interest in narcissism and the effects of narcissistic abuse stem from? I think you mentioned somewhere you had an early introduction within your family.
Well, yeah, I think it's tricky. I when I was in my 20s went to therapy because I didn't feel quite right with everything. And I was very fortunate to have a great therapist who had awareness at the time. I mean, this is a long time ago, about just narcissism and different dynamics within the family. And I think that the sort of ongoing, then I trained as a counsellor and became much more interested in the narcissism further down the line, and just how people in differences relationally work, and what our expectation is of the other in all sorts of dynamics. So yeah, it became a little bit of a wormhole that I dipped into, and worked with narcissistic abuse from about, I think, 2011, 2010. Worked with the Echo Society, which is a
Um,
counselling for narcissistic abuse, and did that for a few years. And then in private practice, it became a specialism just through repetition. And yeah, yeah. And I think it's one of those things that now, in the last few years, it's a bit like ADHD and autism, and we're kind of that realization that people are different, that we're not all the same. And it's become so popularized, narcissism and narcissistic abuse. So it's changed the nature of therapy in my practice from way back when people didn't know, and they couldn't understand the effects of, or didn't know about gaslighting, or didn't know about coercive abuse in the same way that we do now with social media. So there is a whole different aspect to working with narcissistic abuse now compared to what it was before.
Because 2011, there was just not the recognition that there is now, just
No.
not on the radar nearly as much as it is.
No. And so when a client would come, it was a case of unpacking like what the self-esteem issues were,
Mm.
how they had developed, and why were they, created around this person where everyone else is fine.
Mm.
And so sort of unwrapping the narcissistic abuse really gently, because it changes everything once you're aware of the narcissistic dynamic, or then the sort of drama triangle dynamic, and being sucked into it. Yeah, yeah, it's
Mm.
different. And whereas now people are contacting me going, I've not been made a cup of tea this morning, I'm with a narcissist.
I mean, a considerable number of my clients, are dealing with the impacts of narcissistic abuse. Some are already aware of it when they contact me, and others are just kind of starting out on their journey of kind of discovering what it's all about and how it relates to them. I mean, do you agree with the general consensus that narcissists don't tend to benefit from therapy that much themselves?
Well, I think it's that combination, isn't it? I mean, it's the most potent combination of grandiosity along with a lack of empathy. If you don't have empathy for others, you don't necessarily know that you don't have empathy for others. But also, if you've then back end it with the grandiosity, where it's not me, it's everyone else, then somebody who's on that narcissistic spectrum isn't going to think it's them. They're not going to sit there and go, maybe I am a narcissist, maybe I have like this form of psychopathy, because their grandiosity will stop them. And I think at some point there will be scientific research to show that people with narcissistic personality have got whatever it is that you need to self-reflect is missing.
Mm.
And I think that it probably will be something missing within the brain that means they can't reflect and be culpable. There's no ability to do that. I might be wrong, but it
Mm.
certainly seems that on that scale of narcissism, there is this huge lack of self-reflection. So why would they come to therapy? And then you've also got, if they do come to therapy, it's a war, isn't it? They've got to be right and they've got to be the winner.
It's that whole self, isn't it? You know, it's sort of as an armor against that self-reflection, we put up that full self
Yeah.
and pour everything into maintaining that full self, which doesn't necessarily, yeah, work well with therapies.
Yeah, and it's all the pretense, it's the outer stuff, and but they don't know that it's pretense. It's the lack of self-reflection. It sort of comes back round in that full circle. Yeah, yeah.
So turning to those who experience narcissistic abuse, what effects might this have on their well-being? What have you seen in your therapy room?
I think in which context do we want to talk about family? Do we want to talk about relationship? Let's stick with relationships. I think
Mm.
so. It's more common that somebody will come when they're lost in this coercive control within a relationship and they don't know what's going on and they can't tell what's above them to what's below them where they're at. And I think I normally get that reach out that says, I need to improve myself because I need to invest more into the relationship. Or with social media, there is that awareness that actually things aren't as well as they should be.
Yeah.
And I think that's where social media has really empowered people to realize actually this is not right what I'm doing. And I think there can be that whole chain of growing up at home, being a good girl or a good boy, and facilitating that family dynamic where you're loved for what you can do rather than who you are. And then to go later into relationships where the same dynamic happens, and so you're always performing, you're always giving, and then it's never enough. And I think that when working with clients, that there's a couple of stages that learning to deconnect from the partner and to, when they call it grey rocking and no contact,
Mm.
but certainly within the hypnotherapy realms, that no contact bit is about mental contact as well, about thinking of them, about everything. Oh, look, I've looked at that daisy, it reminds me of them, and learning to put in walls within our minds to
Mm.
say, I'm going to look at a daisy for what it is and not what it is. So that internal no contact. And I think that
Mm.
that's where hypnotherapy can really help to learn to move away from that and into a different space. And we've got so many ways of being in contact mentally, socially, social media, all of, I'm just going to check to see when they were last on. all of that stuff
Mm,
and learning. So there's that sort of initial part of the therapy. Then there's working with the self-esteem and healthy boundaries and being like worthy. It's okay for me to put in boundaries. It's okay for me to say, no,
mm,
that that's not for me. And to learn to know, because so many aspects of us get shattered, our self-esteem by reinforcing old family dynamics, all of those things get shattered, and then we're rebuilding them from scratch. That is about all of these little nuggets of self-esteem that say, I'm worth it, no to that. Do I have to give a good reason why? No, I don't. And so then we sort of go into that phase of rebuilding the self-esteem. And then if we're ready, looking at the patterns, like how have we got to this point?
mm. I think it's interesting what you say about, that these patterns can sometimes, a client might come because they're in a situation like that, but it may have started a long way that they were the person who was judged in childhood, in the family. That
Yes.
sometimes the threads of it can go back further.
Yeah. And because we have such a, it's the bar of tolerance is so much lower when you come from a family dynamic that has elements of narcissism or elements of what the child should do to provide for the family. And I think that, so a lot of people will say, oh, why me? And actually, why not? you know your defenses are much lower than everyone else's. If somebody's
Mm,
grown up being told, oh, you're loved, you're the, I support you, and yes, you have feelings that are valid and all of that, you don't tolerate people who say the other. But if you grow up in a family that doesn't recognize your feelings or doesn't, give you that space to be yourself, then, well, hey, the doors are open.
mm.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting as well, you said about building up self-esteem, that might mean people, some things people who haven't experienced narcissistic abuse. If you have, it, those sort of coercive controlling behaviors can kind of live rent free in your head
Mm.
for a long time after the abuse.
Yeah.
You've got yourself out of that abusive situation. You've really got to rebuild yourself from the ground up.
And learning to champion yourself
Mm,
and not have to justify it. I think the difficulty comes where one has, I do a lot of work with highly sensitive people. So Elaine Aron, back in the 70s, 80s, discovered there are people that are more sensitive than others. And it's a bit like we have more taste buds on our tongue. We
I
pick up
think.
as sensitive people. And chances are, as a therapist, we're probably in the highly sensitive. So we've got highly sensitive one end of the spectrum where there's 15% of the population feel more and just all of their senses, there's just more. And then we've got the other end of the spectrum, the sort of narcissism end that feel less and process it differently. And somewhere I think with like the vulnerable narcissism, that highly sensitive can meet the narcissistic stuff where I need to be catered for all my sensitivity, and that then becomes a narcissistic vehicle. But most of us who grow up as highly sensitive will be feeling more than our family, will be feeling more dynamics. I've had a client who said she remembers the way her mum woke up by the way she opened her curtains,
Right.
and that clank, 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 and she knew that she was in. So you develop this sort of ESP around, how am I going to be treated today? And so we might genetically be predisposed to being highly sensitive, but also we might build on that if we're in a particularly difficult environment. But then also, if we know that we're highly sensitive and we know that our sensitivity is more than others, then we also have to allow a space for people to be less sensitive and less aware, and without calling narcissist, by saying, they just don't have the same sensitivity range. So they might do something that's a little bit callous or a little bit thoughtless, because it is. But if we're up here with a PhD in sensitivity and we're dating somebody with an A level in sensitivity, it's going to feel different. There's going to be challenges, and then you go with people who are unqualified with sensitivity right at the other end. And so, and what I love about what social media is doing is it's showing that there isn't just one category of person. We physically, we accept that we're all different. I've got brown eyes. I don't expect people to have brown eyes. I don't expect, like, you've got blue eyes, become brown. And I think that we expect that mentally. We expect other people to be like us, and we don't allow for that difference. And that we've all got stuff to learn. We're all vulnerable. We all make mistakes, all of that stuff. And having that sort of flexible space that says, how do I deal with a different way of being? How do I deal with a different person? I think it's really important that we're just going to realize, oh shit, like, life is full of all of this difference, and we don't have to point and but don't get me wrong, there are cases where there is narcissistic abuse and there is coercive control and there is all of this violence within families and relationships and the workplace and friendship groups even. But it is recognizing, who am I in this and how do I protect myself? Yeah.
And I think it's interesting what you say, feeling that sense of safety. When people experience narcissism, they don't feel safe. That hypervigilance kicks in, so they're always listening for the clack of the curtains. They're 2 steps ahead of the game. How can I make myself safe in this? So in a way, therapy can help them develop a sense of safety from themselves, really. So I mean, you've talked a bit about how hypnotherapy can help. I was interested in how hypnotherapy specifically as a modality.
I think it's that building. I like to think of it, when you get medieval castle. So you got a medieval castle, and then you've got outbuildings, and then you've got the villages, and then and all of them are walls. And with narcissistic abuse, and with that, you tend to get people who've got a medieval castle, villages, but only one wall on the outside. So once that narcissistic abuse comes in, they just ransack everything. The villages, the castle, the king, the queen, the lot, because there's only one wall at the outer edge. And, whether that is because we've been brought up with fantasy and fairy tales and we let people in, or we've been trained to let people in, we've just got that one wall. Whereas a lot of healthy people in relationships have several walls, like, I'm going to let you into this one, but then you've got to get across the moat, and I've got to put the drawbridge down before I'm going to let you into the castle, and there's a couple more doors. And so with hypnosis, it's learning that there doesn't just have to be that one wall where everyone can get straight into you, and it's learning to put all of these little defenses in that say, I don't have to fully trust somebody right from the minute that they say, oh, you're lovely. I don't have to. It's okay. And I think particularly when you've grown up as a sensitive and you're navigating the world as a sensitive, you don't want to disappoint the other person. So you do open the doors. So hypnosis is a little bit about putting in those defenses, feeling confident that you can say, oh no, you can go in the outer grounds, but you're not coming into the inner sanctum just yet.
You're not crossing me yet.
Exactly. So with hypnosis, we create that confidence, build up the self-esteem, and work at those things that say you're allowed to do that, you're allowed to protect yourself, and it's okay to disappoint people. And I think sometimes it's that bit there where I don't want to let the other person down. I want to be there for them, or I want to, they've pushed my boundary, but I'm showing them that I love them by allowing my boundary to go down, and so on. So with hypnosis, it is about rebuilding the establishment, essentially, that is ourself.
I really like that analogy, actually, of like all the different sort of barriers that you can put up and all the different, yeah. And I think it's also, rebuilding that sense that it's okay to have needs, that
Yeah,
needs in a narcissist can often be dismissed as needy.
yeah.
And it's actually, no, it's okay, you've got needs. You're a human being
Yeah.
living life. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's where that family dynamic, the patterns come in about how one quashes the needs to actually it's okay to have needs, and that comes with being confident and saying, yeah, I'm allowed to say this, even though I might get called too sensitive, even though I might get called needy, or you want too much from me, or and it's learning, okay, if I want too much from you, then we're not right.
Mm.
If you can't navigate that in a good relational way and have that discussion, it's learning to say we're not a good mix without pointing a finger, but just saying, okay, I have needs that need to be met. This is not going to work.
Yeah, if you're not comfortable with that, then actually
Yeah.
this isn't a good
Yeah.
relationship for me.
Yeah, and,
Mm.
and sometimes it can take a long time to get to that point. It can take lots of work, because it's, I really love the metaphor of the two fishes swimming along, and one fish says to the other fish, "Oh, the water's warm today," and the other fish goes, "What's water?" And essentially, with
Ah, I've not
uh,
read that one. That's great.
who's the quote from, but I love it. I just
I'm
think,
pinching that just to.
oh, it's not mine. That bit that you're when I'm working with my clients, I'm teaching them that there is water. And because if we've got all of that conditioning with life, it's learning about the water as much as it is about everything else. And that's what makes working with the narcissistic dynamic a bit more complicated than perhaps other things. It's recognizing all of these lifetime patterns that come in.
So if someone's listening now who is or thinks they might be, or seeing some stuff on social media, sort of thinking around narcissistic abuse, what would you suggest? What can they do today to start changing their situation for the better? What steps can they take to look after themselves?
Well, I think there's a couple to know how we're feeling, to recognize that if we're in conflict, I like to work with the heart, the head, and the gut, and having that triangulation, because sometimes we can go, well, my heart loves him or her, but my head says no. And those two can just be, but what we want to do is get the gut involved, that wisdom that goes, does this feel right? And chances are that system, that triangulation is broken down somewhere along the line because we're overriding it all of the time. And we end up with this heart head argument. So to actually sit with ourselves, recognize the feelings that, is this right? Would I allow this, for my child? Would I allow this for my best friend? If I was thinking, because normally we're compassionate for others and not so compassionate for ourselves. And if I thought my best friend was going through it, or one of my children, I'd be like, no, stop this right now. Do you know? And so to actually see your relationship or see your experience through another position, imagine it's your best friend going through it, what would you be saying to them? And to have that moment, but also one of the first things that we do, if it is about a relationship with a partner, to actually sit down and go, what is real? And what is my projection? What's the fantasy? Am I in love with the fantasy of this person? Because the fantasy and the reality don't normally add up. So literally write that list, oh, he's called me once and she's done this for me once, but it was so special. But what about all the other times?
That's the thing, is the breadcrumbing, isn't it? I mean, I'm aware that we're covering a big topic in a
Oh,
short time.
I know, I
So,
know. Yeah.
I'll put a link to your website on, because there's loads of resources and blogs on there. And also there's a really helpful glossary as well with all these
Yeah.
terms but that kind of breadcrumbing, that if I'm just a little bit more, I'll get back that lovely person who did all these wonderful things and said all those lovely things about me. But yeah, it's finding that balance of, well, was the last time that happened?
Yeah. And
What
is
were
this,
the circumstances?
yeah, and is this who they
Is it
are?
worth the input? Yeah.
And I think separating the real from the projection is really important. And particularly for people who have got this systemic line of the family history, if you have brought yourself up as a child, how much have you brought yourself up with fairy tales, with it's okay to be Cinderella because this is my Prince Charming, he's recognized me, or all of those different versions of fairy tales that we kind of hold in the other without actually seeing, oh yeah, I am doing everything to hold this relationship, to keep it, I do feel like I'm walking on eggshells, all of those things. And whether that's eggshells because we don't want to disappoint, because we think we're crap at that moment, like these are really good red flags to say, nah, wouldn't, what would I be saying to my best friend right now? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we can often be have a lot more perspective when we're thinking about that, as what would I say to a friend?
Yeah.
Would I
Yeah.
be happy about them living in that situation?
Yeah. Or what would I say to my child
Mm.
if they were experiencing this? All of those things that chances are, I really like Occam's razor, which is, the most likeliest outcome is the outcome. So I I do say if it looks like shit, smells like shit, you don't have to taste it to know. So, like, essentially, if you are feeling all of these feelings, the most likeliest outcome is that the relationship is toxic. So, it doesn't necessarily mean narcissistic, doesn't necessarily mean that there's any finger pointing, but something's going on. Otherwise, you would be happy. So, maybe listen to those feelings and actually what are they saying to you, what is going on. And that's the difficulty with gaslighting and coercive control, is actually what are we feeling, what are we feeling.
Yeah. And what is my space in this relationship?
Yeah.
Do I have a space in this relationship, or is it,
Yeah.
I'm just supposed to be meeting somebody else's needs? And I think
Yeah.
it's quite profound that, we can't be responsible for how someone else is feeling, but we have to be responsible for our well-being at
Yeah.
the
And
end
it
of the day.
takes a lot of work to get there. It takes
Mm.
a lot of work to get there. And that's where things like the drama triangle, transactional analysis can be really helpful, where you have the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer. And this dynamic is a shadow dynamic, so it's all around us in everything, and we might be the victim, we might be the rescuer, we might be the person, but invariably, if you're suffering from narcissistic abuse, you're the rescuer, you're rescuing others all of the time. And that bit, but there can be no other position in the drama triangle. So we will rescue and then we will feel like a victim, or we will rescue and then we want to blame them for not coming back to us and being like, so once we put ourselves in the drama triangle, or somebody else puts us in there, it can be really uncomfortable to take responsibility for our needs. And it can appear selfish because essentially we are looking after ourselves. And so when we come out of that drama triangle of like expectation and we come into this, I'm going to take responsibility for my needs, for myself. It feels really cold, especially if you've been brought up as a rescuer and people are used to you rescuing. They're like, why? Why are you saying no?
Yes, yeah. And it can be beguiling, isn't it? It's nice to be nice,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
not at the extent of your own well-being, not at the extent of your own, sort of resources being drained, you know.
yeah. And so it feels like a different space because it's clean, it's healthy, and it's a little bit like it's nice eating chocolate and cake, but actually it's really clean and it's healthy having broccoli. Not the best metaphor example, but
Yeah. Yes, yeah, yeah. A little bit of a cleanse, sort of what's actually going to do me long-term good here, as opposed to, those little bits that keep things going, but don't really nourish you in the end of it. Yeah.
yeah, I think coming out of that drama triangle, recognizing that none of them are particularly healthy in that space, and that we're all avoiding responsibility, whatever part we are in the drama triangle, and what does taking responsibility look like? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. Like it's been, brilliant insights, so thank you very, very much. I mean, you are a very busy lady. What's going on for you at the moment? What projects are you involved in? What's the National Council of Hypnotherapy up to at the moment?
Well, as usual schmusual, we're supporting Adam Eason with the UK Hypnotherapy
Oh
Convention in
yeah.
November, which
Yeah,
is
it's coming soon.
and yeah, he's doing some great stuff,
Mhm.
pulling people involved in hypnosis together. I really like, and it's nice, over the years we've created conferences that have taken our resources like time, money, all of those things and put them into a conference. And why, when we can support, it's expensive, it's costly in both time and energy, and it's nice to support fellow hypnotherapists who are doing some amazing good stuff. So we've sort of pivoted a little bit to say, like, let's support people doing their conferences, and it's been great. Work
Yeah,
with Adam has been brilliant.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll send you the link for that as well.
Yes, brilliant, brilliant. And it's great, isn't it? Because it's sharing good practice. It's like raising the profile of hypnotherapy. It's
Yeah, and also, with the NCH, we're not particularly event organisers. Work within your remit. So that's been we're going to start hiring soon for some new directors. So that's quite exciting
exciting, yeah.
for the team. And I've been doing the podcasts as well. It's
Yes, yeah, yeah.
a little bit weird, but then again, we've got a great team and it's just lovely. And
Mm,
then doing the same old support for members, just loving it. I find for me, working on my own in private practice is great, love it, but I need people. I need to be part of the team.
absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I'm part of a team with, and it's just great doing that. And it's keeping up those standards, isn't it? It's getting us out there as a organization that has standards that we're all, sort of, yeah.
And I think that's been such a driving force because hypnotherapy is unregulated, counselling is unregulated. And so you can just wake up tomorrow and say, I'm a hypnotherapist, I'm a counsellor, I'm a therapist. They're not protected
Mm,
titles. And I think that where training is really important,
mm,
standards, following an ethical code, really important. And I think that we can't speak for the whole of hypnotherapy because there are people who go and do 1 day training and think, yeah, great, I'm a hypnotherapist now. But we don't know what we don't know. Again, it's the fish in water.
yeah.
I didn't know about regulations when I trained early doors about in hypnotherapy. I was just very fortunate that I found a course that met the training criteria. I didn't know about, national occupational standards of hours for training, and people don't. And I think that would be the best way for the NCH going forwards, to actually let people know that you can do a course with quite a famous person, but you don't meet our national occupation standards for training hours.
Yeah.
And they're there for a reason. So
Mm.
all of those, yeah, that's what, oh, I'm going off on a rant on there.
No, that's fine. No, I remember doing, finishing my portfolio when when I got the, NCH diploma, and I did a video of like all the little the files I'd done. It took about 10 seconds to scroll this of all, but yeah, that's how you build up. That's how you know,
Yeah.
build a credible practice, isn't it? From that basis of
Well,
standards and common, yeah.
and I think where you have that training with your training schools, what the HPD then does is it consolidates your
Mm,
learning and
mm.
rounds us off as practitioners that, yeah, great. And then we can go into the field knowing what to do with safety, knowing how to be ethical, knowing that there is a code to follow. And that all of those things give us these, city walls, essentially, boundaries.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I like the
So
way you tied that in there.
I just thought I'd pick that up too.
Yeah.
Lots
Oh, thanks so much, Tracey. It's been really great talking to you. And you can find information about our other podcasts on our website, www.afsfh.com, where you'll also find articles, information, and resources. Plus, of course, our solution-focused hypnotherapist directory, where you'll be able to look through the profiles of our fully qualified members and choose just the right therapist for you. So next time we'll be talking to Paul Turner of 3A Tutors in Bristol about exam anxiety and how to manage it. Until then, I'm Sally from the AFSFH. Thank you very much, Tracey.
Oh, thank you for having me on. Lovely.
And this has been Talking Solutions.